So we just brought the new frame home from powder coat. It's New Year's Eve day. They look a little different once it gets powder coat on them than they do when they aren't powder coated. They start to look pretty nice. So first order of business is going to be clean out all the holes where all the bolts go, steering shafts go, pedals bolt on, where the spindles, kingpins go down through. Those holes all got to be cleaned out. Also brought back the box full of spindles here that I had made. These all got powder coated. Look really nice. You remember we were going to be down in the basement polishing those pans, floor pans, so I got these out here ready to go. Now we're busy putting our spindles in. And our spindles, I start with a little machine bushing underneath the bolt head there. And then on the bottom we will put a 16mm stainless steel washer on the bottom. Right there. When we get ready to put our nut on. That way, because the threads are at the bottom of that spindle hanger. You do not want to have the threads in your spindle hanger. You want to have them below the spindle hanger. So you're going to put that washer on there. That allows your nut to snug that up. Common mistake for everybody that runs these carts is that they let too much slop between the hanger and the spindle. That allows your spindle to prematurely wear, and it flops back and forth when it gets a lot of wear in it. If you keep those snugged up, actually the contact area between the spindle and the hanger does more for your spindle staying nice and snug and not wearing out than what the actual spindle bushing itself does. So initially you want to set these up so they got quite a bit of drag on them. They might be hard to steer the first day or two you run them. Then they'll start to free up. Once they get freed up good and you get the powder coat started to wear off, or your paint, whichever you're using, you'll have to re-snug these every now and then because they will want to wear in a little bit and wear that paint and powder coat off there. So keep your spindles tightened up. I've seen people that have spindles that allow their wheels to flop back and forth and camber, and makes for a real poor handling. Well, we've been working about 4.5 hours now. So by having most of the parts ready before I get the chassis back, it starts going together pretty fast. We'll soon have the front end together. Now anytime I take and drill a bolt to put a cotter pin through, if it's a 3/8 or larger bolt, I always drill at least an 1/8 inch hole in it so that I can put a substantial cotter pin in it. I don't like doing steering parts with a little flimsy cotter pin. Like my steering shaft, I don't bother to chrome that. We build our carts to race. They'll still show nice. 95% of that steering shaft will be covered up anyway with a Nassau panel, so you'll hardly see any of it. Steering wheels I get from Speedway Motors. They look a lot nicer on the cart than an Azusa wheel. The only bad thing about this wheel is it does have 1 inch more dish than most of the stock factory wheels had. On some carts, if the steering wheel is really close to you, it might be a little bit of a problem. Well, I'm getting ready to hook up the throttle assembly to this. I always take a bushing, put a bushing in here, and that allows this to be able to be moved around. If you take the bushing out, it makes it really easy to put the spring on. We're hooking up the throttle. I use a more modern throttle assembly setup on my carts. It doesn't use the big long rods that hook up along the seats and that sort of thing. If all that stuff was really the way to go on throttle assemblies, they'd still be doing it today. These give really good pullback, allows your lines to come in and anchor really well. One of the things you want to do when you have your throttle cable on, and a lot of guys don't do this, is make sure that not only do you want a little ball end or whatever on your cable to pull your cable on this side, you also want to have another throttle stop set screw piece on this other side to help push it back. Even though that cable's flexible, you want to have the return going back with the cable so the cable can't be stuck in the housing. A lot of guys only depend on that spring on the carburetor to return the throttle, and that'll get you in trouble at some point. May get you hurt or may get somebody else hurt if you have a stuck throttle out on the track. So you always want to think safety when you set all this stuff up. These carts can be fast and they're not just a toy. Alright, I just got this all together, and you want to have enough a thread on your rod so that when you get your throttles hooked up, this spring should bottom out when the throttle's full open, so you can't twist the throttle shaft off in your carburetor. So you want to have enough adjustment on this end. Believe me, this thing will snap back. Now, since we were down here before, got the throttle hooked up, but also have the front bumper installed. I mounted on Heim joints at the ends. No matter what this front end does, it won't ever bind anything up. Plus, everything can rotate inside this tube. Very efficient setup, doesn't weigh hardly anything. And like I said before, I like to walk. When I leave an event, I like to walk away. So it protects my feet should anything bad happen. Just put the bolts in on the front bumper. They're just in loosely right now. One of the reasons I run a front number panel a lot of times is that many of the tracks, they have a hard time reading their numbers when they're just on that Nassau panel. Put a white panel or whatever panel you put on the front of your cart with a big number on it. Really helps the scorekeepers out. May not seem like a big thing to you, but it's a big thing to them. And if it helps them, even though it's not truly the traditional vintage method, if it helps them out, that's a big plus. Another thing I do is when I mount a throttle pedal, I don't mount it straight up and down, I mount it tilted back, because the only time it's gonna ever be that way is when it's just sitting here. Because even when you get in your cart and you go to start your cart, you've automatically pushed the throttle part way, so you're into the straight position, and it just makes it easier. You don't have so much forward travel when you're got the throttle all the way down. It's a little easier on the ankle and foot, especially when you get to be up. Also, you might notice that when your pedals are mounted this way, it doesn't seem like much, but that's quite an increase in legroom versus a pedal that's normally straight up and down or mounted behind the axle. In a rear cart, a couple inches is huge. In the case of this cart has a 2-inch stretch chassis. It's 2 inches longer here in the front end. Being 2 inches longer here with this pedal setup, I don't care if you're 6'3", this cart's going to be relatively comfortable for you. A lot of the people that get into vintage karting right away, they don't want a rear cart because they don't fit in one. Well, it's true, they don't fit in some of them. And the older rear carts had the seat 2 inches further forward than what the later rear carts did. So if you have one of those carts, you don't want to be very big because you're probably not going to fit in that one. In the case of the first one that I did when I got into vintage karting, because I wanted the same thing I had when I was a kid, and I did find that, but the seat was so straight up and down I couldn't sit in the cart because of a motor vehicle accident I had with my pickup truck driving off a 4-foot bank at 55 miles an hour and ripping my back apart. I could not sit in that cart. One day of practice in that cart and I would be laying in my trailer the rest of the weekend because I couldn't walk across the parking lot. So all my carts, yes, the seats tilt back more, and maybe that's not the earlier carts that didn't have that advantage for seating. But you know, a lot of times there's things that happen to people that require you to have to make some changes in order to even be able to drive one of these. And for the purists, they don't like it, but in reality you got to make a few changes here and there in order to be able to comfortably drive these things. If you're not comfortable in a cart, you're not going to be able to drive it. Given a little bunch of little pointers that I found in here, you don't have to agree or disagree with them. It doesn't make any difference to me when you put your cart together, but it may help a bunch of people in the end, and if it does, that's a good thing, because the more people we get on the track, the more people we see at the events, the more fun we get to have. Really enjoy hanging out with everybody. Getting back to the steering wheel, the 3/4 inch bolts that hold that steering wheel on, because this is an automotive wheel, you have to slot those holes each about 1/8 of an inch for them to have the right configuration for the Azusa steering. This is the steering wheel here. Speedway Motors. There's the part number for you if anybody decides they want to use this. Working on things here. Last time we had the front end together. Now we got the seat pan in. That's what I was talking about. By using those tabs on the seat pan, you can see where 4/4 inch bolts on the rear of the pan, 2 on each side panel. Even if I never put a rivet in there, that's not going anywhere. And the front of the seat pan sits on top of the floor pan, so it's not going to drop down, and it can't catch on anything when you set it on top. You want to pre-fit your pan before you ever go to powder coat, because you can't be beating around on these edges once the powder coat's on there. Even though I've beat on them a little bit every now and then on something that hasn't hurted any, you never know when you're going to knock a chunk off. And this gives you an idea on the tabs on the back. This thing is a much better method than pop rivets. You want to put a couple pop rivets in? So this doesn't have any lower rail for it to sit in. I just decided this was a better method. Now you can see we've got the axle, the dual mounts hung in place, brake rotors in there, the sprocket is in there. I've got to get another one for this side yet. I don't have another one for this side. Getting ready to put keys in. When you do the keys, you step the key down like this so that slides in underneath the bearing. That way the key can't lift up and come out. And I got it tapered so it fits into the taper slot in the axle. And I always put a full-length key in, even if I have to put a little clamp on the end of it. Some guys use tape. Some people use a hose clamp. I use the regular 2-piece axle collar, split collar, to put on aluminum one. Doesn't really add any weight. This way your key's not coming out. Same thing on the end of your axle. Make sure you put that key in full length with this end down underneath that bearing so it can't lift up out of there. Also hold your axle in place, can't slide back and forth. When I put the collars in on these, I sat down and figured this out before I ever put everything together. The collars go together, so they butt right together, so I don't have to worry about the mount going anywhere. I don't have to worry about the axle shifting. I don't have to worry about any wheels. The collars from the 2 bearings butt together, so that way it's pushing right at, can push right at the axle hanger bearing, and it's not going anywhere. Puts the split collars I was talking about. Finish holding those keys in place so they cannot move or go anywhere. Most people realize they need to use longer keys nowadays, but back in the old days, guy used to buy one piece of key stock and try to do every keyway on the cart, and he'd put in a little key about an inch long. I also put traction bars on this cart because of the way this frame's made. They handle terrific because they have a lot of frame flex, so it really keeps your tires on the track. But on a dual, we put these traction bars on to help keep everything planted in place. Take some of the flex out of the chassis. Last year I did a 360 spin there at Newcastle and just kept right on going because the cart never picked up a single wheel. Here's an area that on all the Alley Cats, the original ones, they all broke right here on the mild steel tubing because the frame pressure of the seat and all the flex and everything, it would crack all the frames back here. You look at almost every original Alley Cat you see, the frame was broke back here. So what I've done is I've put a gusset in here, this small gusset underneath, and it catches the seat back, the side tube, and comes all the way back to where the cross tube is. So that ties everything together. This cart will outlive me.
Take a lot of time.
We're back here at Tough Dog Leather. Megan's got our seats upholstery made, so now I get to go home and install all the snaps, put it in place. And as you can see, we got feet behind the cart. Oh, that's Sandy and Megan.
Oh, I'm in the video.
So yeah, well, this is cool. Now we can go home. In a week's time, we'll have this all finished. We'll have the last of our video cart build-off done. Everybody can see it, and we can get these babies ready to get on the track because the weather's starting to get nice. Well, I've got the cart back to the house now, so we can start getting ready to put the upholstery in. I always put the snaps in myself. Gone ahead and marked where I want to install the snaps. After I get them in the frame, then I can come along, press down exactly where I want them, and I can put the marks on the upholstery, put the snaps in the upholstery. One of the things I didn't show before, I don't believe, is the front of this seat pan has this panel put in it here. Can't slide forward any further than that panel. When I shot the video before, I don't think that panel was in place. So I'm going to get ready and start drilling and put in all the snaps. I use steel blind rivets inside the snap. Got a few of the first part of the snap installed. Years ago I modified my rivet tool by grinding the head down rather than have the head big and square like that. It fits right down inside the rivet, so it gets the rivet in nice and tight. Now I'll continue to put a bunch more of these in. I just finished getting all the snaps in on the upholstery. It's got it all installed now. And it really needs to go sit in the sun now to finish conforming to the shape of the cart. Everything came out just fine. So now we can move on to the next stage. Just drilled the holes for the gas tank, cut a rubber mat to go underneath. This is cut out of rubber roofing material, and I double layer it, and then we're going to put the gas tank on top now, and then we're going to bolt it all in place. Just finished bolting the big pyramid gas tank in. Basically a 2-gallon tank. I custom bend these tanks up, then I take them up to DCA Racing, La Crosse, Wisconsin, and have Dan weld the tank up for me. Put the filler neck in. Just turn the steering wheel a little bit, take the cap off, put your funnel in there, fill it up. Got a sight glass on it so I can tell, the tube can tell me how much fuel's in it at all times. And probably the next thing is start bolting motors on top of this cart. Well, here we are at Sugar River Raceway. We're doing the last of the vintage cart build-off. So today we actually get to test this cart and run it. Hopefully everything goes well. I think everything's pretty much up and ready to go. And we'll take some video of it here and see how everything flies here pretty quick. Take a little bit and get fuel pumped up to by now you've seen the kart in action here at Sugar River Raceway today. There's part of the support crew.
There's support already.
Yeah, support all right. Boy, my back hurts so bad I need support.
I'm wore out.
But, you know, the kart worked great. Motors ran fine. And so our vintage kart build-off for the Vintage Karts Forum is pretty much concluded. So David,
See you next week.
this and all the crew on the Vintage Karts Forum, this is for you guys. Enjoy.
See you next week when we race it.
Yeah, next week we race it down here.